destruction. For more on this, let's bring in the co-anchor of CNBC's Squawk Box and a New York Times columnist, Andrew Sorkin, who also only consumes European alcoholic beverages, so he will be hard hit, to be sure.
Prosecco.
There we go.
I'm a Prosecco man. Because that's not, it doesn't, that won't be tariffed. And maybe but then I assume it'll cost me more in the end. I don't know. We'll see.
Almost undoubtedly. So, Andrew, let's just get your reaction here. Both, the European EU tariff news just a few moments ago on Truth Social. But certainly it has been days worth now of increasingly hostile rhetoric from President Trump, Canada, Europe, the like, and seemingly not backing off these threats of tariffs.
Look, I just think there's two things that we need to talk about this morning. One is just some historical perspective. I think we might have mentioned it on the broadcast before, but you go back to 1930, Smoot-Hawley, those tariffs, and then you look a year later, what happened to global trade? It dropped by 60%. That's what happens when you get in a trade war. It becomes a back and forth. It becomes a retaliatory effort. That's where we are, and if it continues, I imagine we will look a year later from now and we will say that global trade has declined in a very, very material way. I will also say something we have not talked about on this broadcast at all. You talk to folks in the travel industry, folks that that are involved in airlines, in hotels, and everything else. This trade war is going to turn into something broader than just a trade war. People in other countries are not coming to the United States the way they used to. You are going to see travel drop, foreigners saying, we don't like these people, literally. And I think that has an economic impact, but has a much broader, more profound impact that has not even been sort of calculated in what's going on here.
So, Lauren, to that point, this is all happening. We can't take it in a vacuum. President Trump is threatening tariffs on our allies, Canada and the EU, at the same time where it seems like the United States is really pulling back from a leadership role on the world stage when it comes to standing up to Russia. We'll have more on that in a minute, as well as abandoning perhaps our Ukrainian allies. And to Andrew's point, this is going to there seems to be this renewed hostility, real anger at the United States that we've growing in Europe. And we had a former minister of Canada here on set just a couple hours ago attesting to it, that this is something that basically saying, Canadians saying, you are our closest friends, and it feels like you betrayed us.
Yeah, you can hear heads exploding all over France. I'll be there next week. I'll hear about it, I'm sure, everywhere I go. This is such a fun... When you leave the United States and you travel especially to Europe, for the last 80 years, the United States has been this beacon, this sort of ideological center for the Western world. And people love the U.S. and want to come here and aspire to U.S. values. And I think we're really seeing potentially a massive sea change on that front, because we do have a majority of Americans who voted for this. It's hard to argue that the president is out of step with what Americans want, when they just elected him. So I think, you also talk about the economic impact here, the hospitality industry, if in fact the tariffs on, wine and spirits, that has a massive impact on the entire restaurant industry and the hospitality industry. We've got cities like Washington that now are seeing a 25% increase in unemployment claims. So like Andrew, obviously looking at the macro, but on the micro, we're talking about tens of thousands of people soon to be unemployed. Our national parks are not going to be functioning this summer. That's a huge job for European to draw. It's really hard to see where this goes in a positive direction.
So in his latest column for the Wall Street Journal entitled, "Is Trump Throwing It Away?" Holman Jenkins Jr. writes in part this: in a few short weeks have seen Mr. Trump, to continue his favorite metaphor, scattering his best card to the winds. The U.S. has been best functioning, most innovative economy in the world at a time when its rivals and partners are all struggling for different reasons. He's throwing it away with his tariff policy. Mr. Trump's program of noisy, chaotic gestures has always raised the question, is there anything coherent behind it? All this would go over much better if Mr. Trump had the good sense to husband the U.S.'s symbolic value as the world-leading economy, a locomotive pulling other countries along. Instead, he's risking this supreme gift in pursuit of what seems a neurotic, i.e. beyond reason or self-interest, obsession with tariffs. And Andrew Ross Sorkin, I'm wondering what the business community, what executives are saying about these tariffs as well. Donald Trump has talked about them for decades, but for decades, they have been criticized as a really bad move.
Look, the Business Roundtable was just meeting, and I think there's no question when you talk to folks who are in that room that collectively, and those speaking out publicly, those speaking out privately, this has created what is the enemy of business. It's the enemy of investment. It's the enemy of employment, which is uncertainty. And I think right now, nobody feels comfortable about what is really happening. And it's mostly around the tariffs more than anything else. We'll have a debate in this country about tax policy and our budgets and everything else. That will create its own uncertainty. But the tariffs themselves have made investors, have made corporate leaders effectively say, I'm sitting on my hands until I can figure out where this is all headed. Now, of course, if you talk to those folks in the administration, they'll say, well, we told you what was going to happen, and this is all going to get figured out by April 2nd. Maybe it does, and maybe after April 2nd, everybody, has animal spirits and goes to work. I think there's a sense that this is not going to end on April 2nd, that there's going to be continued uncertainty, that this is actually going to be held over folks, if they are implemented, for years, and will always be a bit of a negotiating cudgel. And so it'll always be unclear whether they're going to be on or off. Under those circumstances, it makes it very difficult for business leaders to do anything.
David Sanger has a smart piece in the New York Times today talking about how these tariffs are in many ways a long shot bet to try to revive industrial production in the heartland of the United States that has seemingly a very, very tough hill to climb. But John Hyman, I want to go to you on this one idea that Andrew just said, just the idea of uncertainty, because take it all together here. It's these tariffs. It's the stock market being extraordinarily volatile in recent days. It's Elon Musk wielding his chainsaw to government agencies, many of which provide vital services to the United States. And possibility the government might shut down in just a couple of days.
Right. Well, roll all that up into one big steaming pile of you know what, Andrew, Jonathan. It's not a pretty picture. And Andrew, this is the question I want to ask you. Right. We're looking at Wall Street's reaction to what's happening and the prospect of what might happen, as you pointed out. We say it over and over again, whether it's on the street or whether it's out in the heartland in the business world, the biggest enemy is uncertainty, and Trump has always been a chaos bomb, right? So a lot of those CEOs of financial firms, Fortune 500 companies, small businesses, anybody who can get Susie Wiles on the phone has been calling the White House over the course of the last few days saying, hey, what's going on? And please stop this. What I want to know from you, given that you talk to so many of these people, is what are they hearing back from the supposed adult in the room, Susie Wiles, and other people in the administration?
They are being given one answer. They are being asked to have patience. That is what is being said over and over again. The market doesn't have patience. And, of course, most businesses don't have patience. They are being told, let's get to April 2nd. You will see where we really are. Give it a little bit of time. We might have some short-term pain. It's the same message that I think we heard from the president, frankly, just about a week ago. Of course, the question is, how much patience does the business community have? How much patience does the American public have? And, if this does persist, how does this, of course, manifest itself in the midterms? What is there, from a political standpoint, a date on the calendar in which you actually have to resolve some of this uncertainty? Because if you were him, meaning the president, how you start to think about how that could impact the politics of this next election.
All right, CNBC's Andrew Ross Sorkin, thank you as always, and NBC News national affairs analyst John Heilman, thank you as well. We're going to take a moment now to look at some of the other stories making headlines this morning.